Ladies and gentlemen, Mining Indaba remains one of the most important gatherings on the African and global investment calendar because it brings together the entire mining ecosystem. And this includes mining companies, investors, technology providers, financiers, policymakers, and development institutions, all under one roof. For Gauteng, our presence here reflects the province's role in South Africa's mining and industry value chain. Gauteng was built as the place of gold, as we all know, but today its mining story is no longer only about extraction. It is about where value is created, where capital is anchored, where technology is applied, and where the future of mineral-based industrialization is taking shape. Let me ground this conversation in evidence. While primary mining contributes only around 1.7 to 1.8% of the Gauteng's GDP, the province continues to play a central role in South Africa's mining economy. Gauteng hosts most of the continent's mining finance, capital equipment manufacturers, corporate headquarters, and key support services like engineering, legal, ICT, and technical expertise. The province provides 16 to 17% of the South Africa's mining jobs, which is around 79,000 people. And mining also supports between 50 and 55% of Gauteng's total exports, even though most of the minerals themselves are mined in other provinces. This shows that Gauteng's mining role has changed. It is no longer just about digging minerals from the ground. Today it is about creating value, supporting trade, building skills, developing technology, and driving industrial activity across the country and the continent. In the past 5 years, Gauteng has attracted about 12.8 billion in mining-related investment, creating over 1,500 new jobs in areas like beneficiation, metallurgy, equipment, manufacturing, automation, and advanced services. This progress comes from deliberate investment, planning, and hard work. It also sets the direction for where we want mining in Gauteng to grow in the future. In the Gauteng Economic Development Plan, the mining sector is highlighted through the Mining Sector Master Plan as a key driver of growth. Mining supports downstream activities such as mineral beneficiation, equipment manufacturing, industrial services, logistics, exports, skills development, and capital expansion across the province. This approach ensures that mining policy advances industrialization, localization, green metals development, and the attraction of long-term investment. The global economy is entering a phase where minerals are in high demand. The World Economic Forum makes this clear in its 2024 white paper, translating critical raw material trade into development benefits, and where it states, and I quote, "Demand for critical raw materials is rising because they are needed for clean energy technologies, and current projections suggest that demand may soon exceed supply," close quote. Under net zero scenarios, the need for minerals used in electric vehicles, batteries, renewable energy systems, and power grids is expected to grow to 2.5 to 3.5 times by 2030. Meeting this demand will require about 400 billion US dollars in global investments in mining, refining, and processing by that year. Gauteng is well positioned to play a central role in this. South Africa has significant reserves of platinum growth metals, manganese, chrome, vanadium, and gold. Between 2020 and 2024, the country exported 3.9 trillion in mineral commodities, with Gauteng accounting for most of the value in the PGMs. Manganese, chrome, and coal exports. The World Economic Forum also issued a warning which shows why policy investment and delivery must work together. It cautions that sustainable development does not happen automatically from mining alone. It requires investment, planning, and effective policy. In other words, having minerals is not enough to create growth. Value is realized where processing, manufacturing, skills, technology, finance, and logistics comes together. This is why Gauteng has focused on building both the upstream and downstream parts of the mining value chain as a key driver of economic growth. South Africa's critical minerals and metals strategy, published in 2025, makes the same point. It notes that local processing and beneficiation of critical minerals could create up to 2.3 million jobs and boost Africa's GDP by 12%, provided infrastructure, energy, and logistics challenges are addressed. Gauteng holds the downstream and supporting layers of mining and green metals industries, including metallurgy, fabrication, mining, equipment, automation, engineering, project finance, logistics, and professional services. Across Southern Africa, this positions Gauteng as a regional industrial hub supporting across border mineral value chains under SADC and AfTA, rather than competing with extraction-focused provinces or neighboring countries. This approach directly aligns with global and regional research, emphasizing the following: regional integration, value chain coordination, and investment facilitation. These are critical mechanisms for translating mineral demand into sustainable development benefits. Today's industry intel session focuses on targeted, action-oriented investment discussions in areas such as the following: green metals and critical minerals value chains, mining technology, automation and capital equipment and manufacturing, beneficiation and localization, and how special economic zones, infrastructure, skills pipelines, and development finance work together to turn mineral demand into bankable industrial projects. As the program shows, the session moves from strategy to implementation, linking mining and our engagements directly to Gauteng's investment pipeline and the Gauteng Investment Conference 2026 to be held now in April. Let me be clear to investors, financiers, and industry leaders in the room. Gauteng is not competing on low wages or regulatory shortcuts. We are competing on institutional depth and policy certainty. We are competing on financial sophistication and technical capability, industrial platforms enabled through SEZs, and market access at scale, both regionally and globally. The South African Critical Mineral Strategy of 2025 sends a message that aligns closely with Gauteng's approach. It states, and I quote, "The future of our country is closely tied to how we develop and manage our mineral resources. By strengthening our industrial base and increasing value addition, we can create jobs, drive innovation, and advance economic growth," I close quote. As I complete, that is exactly what this session is about: a practical, focused engagement. The future of mining in Africa will not be shaped by extraction alone, but by how we use mining to build integrated, high value, and resilient industrial economies across the continent. I wish you well in your deliberations. Thank you very much, Program Director.
Thank you very much, MEC. Indeed, words that we will take into our panel discussion as well as we answer some of those questions that were between the lines in that address. And of course, as he said, mining is not just about extraction, it's about where value is created, and that policy, investment, and delivery need to work together. So really speaking to that collaborative effort. And part of that delivery is on the completion of the structural reforms. Of course, we know that we are actually ahead under Operation Vulindlela here in South Africa, but still we have a way to go. And trade also is a very big component of that delivery, especially in a changing global trade environment where there's a renewed push for regional integration. Of course, this all speaks to the job creation opportunities that are there. As the MEC mentioned, that Gauteng has 17% of South Africa's mining jobs. So it really speaks to the important role that the province is playing, and maybe we can create a template that the rest of the nation can use. All right, now we move on to our panel discussion. After the panel discussion, we will have a question and answer session. So if you could get your questions ready along the way. So just before we get to that, let's get into the meat and potatoes of the conversation today. So I'd like to call on my panelists to join me on stage. So Evan Bird, Group Technical and New Business Director at MEC and he is here representing SAMPEC, that is the South African Mineral Processing Equipment Cluster. Then may I please have Gary Lane joining us. He is the president of, I don't know if there's an acronym, SAME or SIAM, there we go. That is the Southern African Institute of Mining and Metallurgy. And then may I please have Matimba Maange, the chair of MEMSA, that is the Mining Equipment Manufacturers of South Africa. He's also the CEO of AJ Engineering Works. And then Dr. Tebogo Makube, the acting Deputy Director General for Sectors Branch at the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition. And please, may we give a round of applause to our panelists. How, Doctor? I see you trying to take my place. Do you wanna switch places? No, but I actually don't want to switch places with you, so I'm fine here. All right. Of course, I'm sure you are all wondering who I'm going to start with. I'm going to be asking you very difficult questions today. But are you okay there? Okay, lovely. Matimba, since you arrived here late, I'm going to pick on you today to start off the conversation. So there's this renewed excitement and confidence in the role that mining is playing and how it can transform a number of industries in our economic future. And the world really is looking to Africa to drive and support this economic revolution. Is Gauteng's mining ecosystem ready?
And thanks for the opportunity. When you look at the Witwatersrand area, we all are aware that about 50% of the gold that is stashed across the whole world has actually been mined out of the Witwatersrand area. And what you see as the Johannesburg, the Gauteng area, the growth that has come in there, the infrastructure that we have there, was spurred by the surge in mining. South Africa is well endowed with lots of minerals. And when you look at the role of mining as in driving that growth in the country, we best positioned in Gauteng to drive that. And why Gauteng is because when you look at logistics, it's easier to ship anything out of Gauteng, and totally the whole infrastructure within Gauteng, it's as an economic hub, allows that to thrive.
Yeah. All right. Evan, your turn. I mentioned at the beginning of my intro that the world is looking to Africa to drive and support this economic future, right? That's all good and well. But at the same time, Africa is not here to serve the world at our expense. And of course, we know that we have been leaning towards, that kind of narrative where we export most of our raw materials with little value addition. Do we have a template for a kind of dual benefit structure where we do drive the economic future and its economic renewal globally, but also one that benefits South Africa and Africa as a whole?
Traditionally, what we're seeing in the last 20 years of doing business, and we base a lot of our work is actually export work into Africa. And that's traditionally, I'd say pre-COVID, was in the region of 80-20. So we're doing 80% exports of mechanical equipment for mineral beneficiation into Africa. That swung around during COVID for obvious reasons. We had to limited travel, so we focused more inward. And then that broke to a 60-40 split. But sub that, we're now seeing a big push for our equipment into Africa. If we look at traditionally the mining framework into Africa was to take the raw material and export it with little beneficiation. And that's largely to several reasons. There's established mineral beneficiation systems in existence in the more developed world. And then Africa doesn't have the infrastructure that can actually set up the role for this mineral beneficiation. You need large power, you need good roads, you need good communication. You need to bring in educated people to assist with the technology and to feed that on into Africa. So it's a challenge, I think, for most of Africa and even South Africa is to keep expanding on that narrative that you've got to provide inward growth. If you don't develop the material in country, you're going to be always on the back foot. You're not going to be have that drive to put in the infrastructure. And we can just look back and see what's here in Gauteng and in most of South Africa was a drive because we had to export equipment and minerals, and you have to put in the infrastructure to do that.
And that's a very important point that, the infrastructure that we're seeing within Africa wasn't really built for this kind of regional integration that we're talking about right now and trade within the continent. It was mostly to be exporting. But let us change that and let's get the investment into the infrastructure that will help us in that endeavor. Gary, I want to come to you because in this mining evolution, that needs people, right? More people than machines. Is the workforce capability moving in an aligned pace with the changes in the mining ecosystem?
Simple answer to that is no. And that's why I wanted to maybe just go back one step to the question about are we ready? And I'm going to say there's a positive and a negative story here. Is critical mineral opportunity into the future is massive. Africa's well endowed. The but is if we don't get ourselves collaborating from a regulatory, government, OEM, mining perspective, we are not going to harness the value, and we are going to basically get exploited of our minerals by multinationals with our investment in the country not going to the benefit of the country. You take some other African countries where there's been massive investment in infrastructure, but it's to export commodities. So you've got railway lines and roads not being utilized by the population, but being utilized by the mining companies to get their exported material out. So I think we've got to, and I think the good news is we know this, but we've got to put everything in place to make it happen. We have a skills mismatch at the moment. We do not have the skills and capability required. And I'm talking about across all levels. We don't have the artisans, we don't have the professional engineers. I was having a conversation with somebody yesterday who said, well, we've got double the amount of mining engineers coming out of universities. We can't even find them all jobs. Well, the reason is we have a mismatch of skill. Those are not the skills we require for the mine of the future.
That's actually quite an interesting thing. Although, because I've worked in the finance industry all my life, I think all the engineers are in finance, so maybe that's why.
Well, I mean, I think what's
I'm sure there's some
important here.
guilty parties here.
Yeah, and we're competing. The mining industry is competing, and if
Yeah.
you need the skills required, we've got to make it attractive.
Yeah. All right. You spoke about a lot of points there that we're going to dig into during the conversation, policy, and obviously that skills issue. Dr. Makovi, I just want to come to you. I mean, Gary talks about policy in an environment where policy tends to be rigid and stubborn, and I mean, the mining industry is no stranger to this. How soon can policy agility be explored as time waits for no one?
Well, as you know, policy is not static, right? It's dynamic. So as government, we have moved. So through the Department of Petroleum and Mineral Resources, we now have the critical mineral strategy. So it's a roadmap as to where we want to go to as the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition. We are working on the industrial policy plan, and that is anchored on 3 Ds: decarbonization, diversification, and the role of the digital economy. So all those policies are interlinked to the subject of discussion today, all right? And for me, it's not necessarily about mining per se.
Yeah.
It's about value addition. So what I call the global scramble for the resources, unlike gold, is not necessarily, they're not needed for storage, those, even though the US last week indicated that, you know, they will stockpiling some of the critical minerals, but the minerals are needed for defense application,
Yeah.
as well as technological application. And that's where we should be positioning ourselves as a country. And Gauteng, it's well suited for that, being an advanced area of the economy. Manufacturing is advanced. Even though, which is worrisome for me, you know, recently the both economies of Gauteng and Western Cape are driven by finance.
Yeah.
All right. So from an economic point of view, finance, it's good, but it's not a tradable sector of the economy.
Yeah.
So we don't export through finance. And given some of the structural challenges we have in the country, not many people can be absorbed in the financial sector, and that's why we have a structural problem of unemployment. So as government, we have to come in. It's an opportune time that there is this demand
Yes.
in the world for critical minerals. They can either be a blessing or a curse for us. So policy is needed
Yeah.
to make sure that we will then identify those areas. We have done that through the critical mineral strategy. What is needed is for government then to direct the investments in areas which are critical for innovation in the space.
Yeah.
Don't worry about unemployment. Don't worry about skills. We have been told we don't have skills.
Yeah. I mean,
When we were planning for the World Cup, we were told we don't
Yeah.
have skills. So we delivered on the World Cup. Skills are a problem, but that does not necessarily mean that we cannot move because we don't have them. We have to train our people, but the investments are key in resolving some of the skills we have challenges with.
we are going to delve into that skills issue shortly. But it's quite interesting you talk about the contribution of the finance industry to South Africa's GDP, that it is the biggest, and mining is no longer the biggest, but mining is one of the biggest contributors to our fiscus. So it really just emphasizes how important it is and that we need to get those growth enhancing policies in line to grow the industry. All right. And as we're talking about, I mean, we can have the strategies, and Gauteng can be well positioned to benefit from this shift in mining and this mining evolution and all this value that we're creating. But we also need to deal with the competitiveness. Is it competitive in the global landscape? Matimba, I want to come to you about the case of South African industry's competitiveness on the global scale. What are we getting right? What levers are we not pulling? What levers are we not pulling hard enough?
Yeah, thanks for the question. So I'm from MEMSA, and MEMSA is Mining Equipment Manufacturers of South Africa. It's a group of more than 70 companies that manufacture here in South Africa, and most of them export their products out of South Africa. And he was saying, the good doctor here, that, you know, let's not worry about skills. When we really need the skills, we push that, yeah. We're sitting here in Cape Town where the first heart transplant was done, and now it's become a norm across the whole world that, you know, to do a heart transplant, you just walk into the hospital and you're going to come out a few days later, you've got a new heart. But people forget that that kind of innovation was done here in South Africa. And then if you then move across to Sasol, and I like giving that example because I have worked for Sasol at some stage. So Sasol unique setup where we talk about beneficiation. People talk about coal and say, you know, it's a dirty commodity, and so we need to move away from that. And little do we understand that about 40 million tons of coal goes into Sasol Synfuels. And Sasol, what it does with its Fischer-Tropsch technology is that it takes coal, superheated steam, and through that process turns the coal into hydrocarbons. And then through their technology within Sasol Synfuels, you'll find products that you're not even aware of, most of you here, that when you drive into a filling station and you buy your bread, as in from Sasco, the chemical that is used there to prolong the life of that bread comes from Sasol. When you wake up in the morning and you use your perfume, the solvent that goes into that perfume comes from Sasol, that process there. You go paint your house, you want it to look nice, the solvents that go into that come from Sasol. The plastics that we have comes from Sasol. You light the candles, now it's Valentine's, you're going to say you are having candlelit dinner. The wax from that actually comes from that process. So when people wish the commodity away, then it's not going to be Valentine's. There's not going to be all the tar on the streets. What you have there from the tar refinery at Sasol, that's what is one of those byproducts that come from that. So we're talking about companies that are making the equipment here in South Africa, the beneficiation. If you look at steel, how steel gets made, you're looking at coking coal, metallurgical coal, and then you mix it up with iron ore, manganese, and all that. And that's how you, in that process, you end up with steel. So you wish away coal, it means you're not going to have steel. So there's a whole lot of things that people are not aware of. And there's great companies that do wonderful stuff. Besides what I do within MEMSA, I'm also in the advisory board with the CSIR to look at industrialization. It's chaired by Professor Nitzin from here in Cape Town. There's companies like HPE in Gauteng that they do mining at deep levels for whether platinum or gold, and they use hydropower. So their equipment is powered by water at high pressure. And so there's no oils, there's nothing going into that environment. And it's technology that is cutting edge technology that has been developed here in South Africa. And next door to my facility, there's a company called DFC that designs these big valves that could be
Yeah.
maybe almost the size of the room or whatnot, and they export that. They've got operations in Brazil, in the USA, and New Zealand, and Australia. So there's a lot that gets done. It's just that we are not aware of that.
Yeah.
And I believe that, one of the opportunities is that in this forum is to get people to be aware that the stuff that's being done, but there's no coordination. So what we are trying to do within MEMSA is to coordinate that.
Yeah.
As industry, as we're sitting here, we are best positioned to train the people in practical sense. And it just needs the funds are there. It's how are the funds properly distributed and directed towards what needs to be done within South Africa.
With the call conversation, you didn't have to threaten us with Valentine's Day.
Yeah.
Gary, you want to say something?
I want to maybe be a little bit more realistic.
Yes.
And we've got incredible engineers in this country, and we've got
Yeah.
examples of incredible innovation. But if we don't sort out our structural challenges, we are literally exporting everything out of the country.
Yeah.
So all our skills are currently being poached. Day by day, we're losing our good engineers globally. All major companies are divesting.
Yeah.
And if we don't, and we've got great opportunity, we have to sort it out. And we've got great historical examples. The challenge we face, if you have a look at it, a lot of our really, really good engineers are busy retiring.
Yeah.
If we don't, and I don't agree about the skills challenge. Apologies, doctor.
So Gary, do we have a skills shortage, a skills gap because we're being hemorrhaged, or they're just not being cultivated effectively?
So we've got an aging workforce in terms of technical skill. We haven't got the pipeline working from our tertiary into industry, and that pipeline is literally broken.
Yes. And are there also gaps, because obviously you're talking about that pipeline from, I guess, school. Is there also a significant gap from between school and by the time people seek work?
Yeah, so engineering, which is fundamental to all of the innovation and technology, is very reliant on STEM subjects.
Yes.
And we unfortunately haven't focused on our STEM subjects, so we're ending up with people with very low capability in a lot of the core engineering subject requirements in university. So we end up with I think the stats are about 88% of our intake in first year do not get through final year.
Can I?
Yes.
Yeah.
One last question, answer from you, Matimba, on this, because we need to give other people a chance.
Yeah, so I am an engineer, and I've gone through the process. I was sponsored by Anglo Gold to study engineering, and I worked in different mines. And one of the things that is a missing link here is that when I started with my training as an engineer at Anglo Gold, the mines were deliberate about it. I learned how to weld. I learned cement technology, concrete technology, and I could do all that stuff. So what is lacking now is that all those companies, big companies that were doing that and marrying the two, as in there's the theory in the classroom and what you get to learn practically. And that practical part can only be done at the moment by us as in the industry.
Yes.
And sort of the likes of Anglo, De Beers and all of them were coordinating that, ISCO and all these big companies, Sasol, and somehow we lost our way there. And,
so would you say there's been a crack in that collaboration between the education system and the companies?
It's the culture, yeah, there's been a crack in that. I mean, it's the culture. I had a stint with BMW in South Africa and also in Germany. And, as an engineer, when you get your degree, you believe you're going to go into the office and get a corner office and you're not going to touch anything, a nice pen and all that. And then first cultural shock when you get to Germany, you find somebody who's way more educated than you, who's got a master's degree, and is actually on the line building the cars. So with us, our culture is we've got people. It doesn't necessarily mean people can be retrained, whether you have studied as in a BA or whatever course. In the workplace, I believe that people are trainable to move into different areas. So, but they're deliberate about it. They've got the engineer who's going to work right from scratch and go through up the ranks and learn the engineering side. So what we're experiencing now is that we've got these engineers that come from university, can't do anything because where are they going to learn this stuff? And it's not the role of the university to actually teach the people there. So that's where we are getting stuck. But the policy and having somebody coordinating that or a body coordinating that and making sure that it's a system that works. It's what we are lacking here in.
I'm going to go back to Dr. Makuba on that, but even quickly, because it seems that there's a weird cycle happening here that, you know, from what Matimba said, that these companies used to be involved in kind of the education system where they used to train students on these critical skills in the engineering mining space. But now because they don't do that anymore, they're now too risk averse to hire those graduates who don't have those skills. So how then do we change that? Is it a case of incentivizing companies to do that? How do we get them to come to the party, to the table with the educators in this area?
Well, we stuck with a challenge that we're in a global space. So we're getting a lot of graduates. A lot of graduates come out of university being basically sponsored because it takes a little bit more than what the tuition fee is to study and be skilled. But skilling is only, the education part is only one aspect of your skill set in especially being an engineer. You know, I often use the example that you know, there's education will tell you that tomato is not a fruit, but wisdom will tell you not to put it in a fruit salad. So what we got to look at is we got to get these guys that have got all the energy and innovative knowledge, but they got to put it into action. And through that action, then they're going to get the wisdom, which makes them really good engineers in the future. And South Africa has been an innovative culture. We have that really entrenched in us. We've got to see how we avoid the hemorrhaging, because there is, I believe there's hemorrhaging. We've had it through COVID. A lot of the skilled engineering shops, and like Matimba there, we represent SAMPEC, which is the South African Mineral Processing Equipment Cluster. And we've basically got together where we, in our local environment, we used to compete against each other, but we're realizing now we've got global players that we're competing in global countries that have got a fixed strategy on how to get their say the industry into the world market. So we got to stick together and see how we can support each other with common problems, and one of them is the skills-based environment.
Gary, I know you want to say something. I actually wanted to come to you because we're talking about, you know, when we talk about skills, we reference education and technical skills. Are there any other skill sets that people in this space need to be able to thrive, and particularly looking at where the mining services industry is going?
So if you really think about it, the mine of the future and even the current mine needs very diverse skills. It's not just mining engineering and metallurgy we require. We need electrical engineers, civil engineers, mechatronics. We need people with data skills, AR skills. We're competing against all the other industries. I mean, a lot of our engineers are going into banking. So we've got to attract them into mining. We've got to make sure the tertiary education program aligns with what the industry of the future needs. So I always like to think very practically. We've got to reestablish the system that is broken. So we've got to attract the right people into mining. By the time they get into university, they've probably chosen where they're going to go already. We've got to make sure our undergrad and postgrad courses are aligned with the needs. At the moment, there's a skills mismatch. And then we've got to reestablish the bridging to get the skills and experience required as quickly as possible to become registered professionals and the continuing professional development, which means we need OEMs, mining companies, investment houses, academia, and regulators to work together to collaborate properly. Now, every one of them have got different incentives. There are commercial incentives, there's egos at play, but we've got to collaborate properly to re-establish that process. And as the president of SIMM, I mean, that's one of my key focus
Yeah.
areas. We've got to look and make sure that the Mine of the Future has the professionals required to meet the requirements.
From a policy perspective, Tebogo, I mean, how closely does the DTIC track and use the trends in the skills landscape in its policy decision-making?
Well, maybe to contextualize the issue of skills, and I must say I'm not a specialist really in skills.
Don't worry, Gary is.
Yes. Look, we are dealing here with the changing world, right? We have to respond
Yeah.
to that. And as I've said, my focus is downstream,
Yes.
all right? So in this country, for instance, now, most of our refineries are not working, right? So we are importing refined oil. So there are losses in the process. So meaning that we have to import bitumen for road construction.
Yeah.
It becomes expensive. We are exposed to currency fluctuations, right? The price of electricity is very expensive in this country, meaning we are not attracting right investments in smelters, right, to process some of the minerals, right? So you lose skills as a result, right? So we have to resolve those binding constraints, right? Now, if you look at the critical minerals landscape, it's dominated by the Chinese, right? They are processing the minerals. You want to attract that capability into the country,
Yeah.
right? So we have Mozambique with graphite, right? We have nickel. You have DRC with lithium in Zimbabwe. There is an opportunity for South Africa to process those minerals, to be the hub for that. So you require different kind of skills. You require partnerships. So we need to contextualize skills that we need for future, the mineral industries. Now, the processing of minerals is still the processing of the mineral itself, but what do you want to do?
Yeah.
So there's a demand for polishing of glasses. There's a demand for ceramics. There's a demand for magnets, for defense materials. That's why the US is jittery in this space. Now, do we have the skills to do those? So it's a different kind of skills that we require. But we are not going to be able to do that on our own without the partnerships with other countries. And that's the reason why the minister was in China last week.
Yes.
So we need that kind of capacity.
Yeah.
So once we have it, we can also develop the skills that we require, right? So I've looked at what is happening in battery manufacturing. The registration of patents is more than 4,000. It's not in this country, right? We need partnerships in order to manufacture batteries for EVs, batteries for stationary applications, battery storage. You need the skills. Now, the other issue that people who are dealing with skills must assist us. If we move full steam on the EVs, all right, what's going to happen to the oil and gas, including those skills that we have at the forecourt? Are we training our people?
Yeah.
So that we can migrate them to the areas, new areas. So skills are important, but we must contextualize the debate, given the changing world that we find ourselves in.
Okay. You make an interesting point. I want to come to Evan before I come to you, Gary. And Dr. Tebogo brings in a very important point to look at China. They're processing critical minerals. How do we have to approach, because as we're talking about competitiveness, how do we approach competition versus allyship? Do we have to separate them, or can we strike a fine balance?
I think we've got to relook at the way South Africa actually came about. We came about with big traditional mining houses, dominant industry, and not a broad-based industry. So when we look at even developing mines, you're looking at big mines, high turnover, big volumes. There was a lot that was spent in exploration.
Yeah,
I think
yes.
in the last 10 years they've stopped that. I see Saudi Arabia now is spending a lot of money and attracting a lot of exploration in their country. So South Africa, I think still, if I quote correctly, and Gary probably know a bit better, is I think we've got the most mapped resources in the world, and it's being documented and it's there for it, ready to take the next step. But what we traditionally did, we went big resources, big events, big mining houses, big industry, singular processing plant. And I think for us, especially in the critical minerals, these don't typically have big volumes. They are sometimes small isolated deposits. And there's a new way of thinking that we need to broaden the base and look at smaller operations that are able to take advantage of this, but also not breed that you're throwing a big organization behind it with a huge funding. We can look at a different concept, and I'm going to throw something out there. In order to grow this base and expand, we've got to look at a different strategy. The yellow mining has it right, because they lease the equipment, whereas when we look at it processing, we want to own the process. But if we're looking at smaller processes that are more modular and movable, we would then enter a different space where you could almost lease the equipment, exploit I don't want to say exploit, but mine the commodity, process it, get it to a beneficiation state, and then this will expand and create more job growth. But you need the financial sector to also be party to this to make it viable.
Of course. Gary?
Yeah, I just want to say, I do agree with the doctor on the point that it's not only about skills. As you probably hear me talking, I always talk about the system.
Yes.
Skills is one piece of the system. So you need the investment, you need the collaboration and integrated platforms, but without the skills, that won't happen. Without that, you still can't achieve it. So skills is a part of the overall system. I also want to just talk a little bit about, at a very practical perspective, here we are trying to build downstream processing capability. I don't know if everyone knows, we've just lost over 70% of our chrome smelting capability in the last 12 months. Now we have 80% of the world's chrome. We had a thriving ferrochrome industry that exported processed chrome ore into ferrochrome. It's no longer competitive because of our unsustainable electricity price increases. We've basically closed about 70% of our ferrochrome smelters in the last year. Lost thousands of jobs. We're now exporting raw chrome, and China is about to build a chrome smelter in South Africa, or chrome smelting complex with their own power station. We had that capability, we had the downstream processing, and we've lost it.
Those are some sobering thoughts. All right, we are running out of time. And obviously, there's still so much to talk about. We could go on for another hour. There's obviously the impact of AI, because at the heart of this mining revolution, you've got innovation in there as well, but also you've spoken about investment and the need for capital to feel at home and to thrive within the mining space, but also talking about that regional integration and pushing trade within Africa. All right, so we have about 3 minutes left, so I'd like last words from you gents. Starting off with you, Matimba, in what you would like to see going forward in terms of the enablers of the mining and mining services industry, and how the industry can come to the party as well.
Yeah, thank you. I say that when I started out, I said that if you look at Gauteng, the industrialization of Gauteng came from the mining side. And that's what drove the industrialization. And I believe that when we talk about these social ills and we talk about the opportunities to revive the economy in South Africa and reindustrialize South Africa and Southern Africa, it has to start with that policy that you have, the policy development, but the entrepreneurs in South Africa. the best position to actually drive the skills shortage issue, as in sort that out, the best position to actually grow the economy. So I'm saying, from my point of view, I'm sitting there as chairperson of MEMSA. You look at companies like Bell Equipment that is competing across the whole world. There has to have been some skills here in South Africa to develop products that will compete with the best across the whole world. But they are moving out of South Africa and sourcing their components and all that outside of South Africa. From what Gary has said about the input costs, which is the electricity there, you're looking at your railway lines. Coal at some stage the export was about almost 90 million tons per annum. It dipped to the lowest about 2 years ago to about 49 million tons because we couldn't take the stuff out. So we could sit here and complain, but I'm saying that, let's look at how these organizations like MEMSA can be better resourced. How myself as an entrepreneur and other people who are entrepreneurs funded by IDC to run the company that I run. So that developmental finance is there. And so and I take about 15 to 20% of my staff out of the 300 as trainees. How do I make a difference without boiling the ocean? We can do it as individuals, but we need support in terms of policy and resources to run MEMS. At the moment, I pay out of my own pocket, Bell pays, HPE pays, and that's how we run MEMSA. And if we could get more funding to coordinate that, then we could multiply the...
Okay. Dr. Teboga, I'm going to end off with you because I think nothing works without policy. But Evan, I want to come to you in terms of how we can capitalize on the opportunities that are available, but also really where, because we talk about this capital that is available, but where it really needs to go for Gauteng to thrive. In this mining evolution. I mean, you look at the fact that I think in 2 months' time, the Gauteng Investment Conference is coming on. So that money needs to go somewhere. What would you like to see there, Evan?
Well, we have to sustain ourselves. We need for me, the manufacturing sector in Gauteng has shrunk. We had a lot of old skilled engineers that ran businesses, and they've, during COVID was a big knock. We lost a lot of industry that supported the manufacturing setup. So it's taken a consolidation, and I echo with MEMSA there. We've got, I'll emphasize again, the South African mineral processing cluster, equipment cluster. And we got that industry where we're trying to recruit more people that are in that sector, and then also work with government, because we feel we can work better with government in order to unlock some of these financial benefits. Unfortunately, we engineers, so a lot of time we've got our heads down looking at innovation, looking at, but we really need the financial support in order for us to unlock these opportunities and create a stable hub. And the skill shortage, I agree, is there, but that can overcome when there's this huge need, and the need has to be supported by financial backing for us to progress.
All right. Last words from you, Gary?
Yeah, I mean, I think we need to walk our talk. I think we need to walk out of our tangible actions. We can fix the pipeline. It needs effort, it needs coordination, it needs proper collaboration. So as SIMM, that's what we're going to focus on. We've probably got we've got incredible capability in Gauteng. We've got 5 technical universities, we've got all our major mining companies here, we've got all the OEMs, but it's completely fragmented. We've got to bring that ecosystem together to work as a proper system to meet the future needs of the industry.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm talking about, the Gauteng investment province, so there is a lot of capital, but it really just needs to feel at home. So, Dr. Teboga, from a policy perspective, what more can the DTIC do to make capital feel at home and the flow of funding smoother?
Well, we need each other, right? So as government, we are not only working on policy, we are also directly involved in investments. So in Gauteng, at OR Tambo SZ, there's a company called Isondo Precious Metals, which is involved in fuel cells. We are assisting that company. There are other companies in hydrogen. The costs are very high. The returns currently are very low, but there is a first mover advantage. So as government, we are involved in supporting those companies. We have the EV white paper, so it's a roadmap on what we want to do in the EV space. There are the biggest incentives that we have as government. It's in the auto industry, including the value chain. So it's not only about money. I think we also have to be creative as government to use off-take contracts, all right, where we can procure innovative products. They are risky, but up until we then come in and cover that risk, we are not going to be innovative. But there are opportunities. So the point is that the fiscus is constrained now, but it's not only about money. There are other instruments that we can use to unlock opportunities. Thanks.
Okay, yeah, talking about the fiscus, I can't wait for the budget because of the precious metals. All right, we will be having a Q&A session, but firstly, and please can my panel stay here because those questions will be directed to you, but I'd like to invite on stage my Dame Matika, the Chief Investment Facilitator at the OR Tambo Special Economic Zone, to give us her key takeaways and a case for investing in Gauteng. A round of applause for her.
Thank you so much. Good morning, and I'm glad that the DTIC made mention of OR Tambo SEZ. It makes my job quite easy. So my name is Maide Matika. I'm with the OR Tambo SEZ company, which is a subsidiary of the Gauteng Growth and Development Agency. Our mandate as an SEZ company is to develop and operate the SEZ that is at OR Tambo International Airport. And one of the sectors that we have been intentional about developing is in the mineral beneficiation space. But before I delve in deeper into that, just the key takeaways from the panel discussions, I think we can all agree that skills in whatever form or shape really was at the center of the discussions. One thing for sure is that there was a shared recognition from all the panel members that skills is important, the importance of skills, South Africa's role in skills development in the mining sector. I think sometimes we underplay ourselves and we forget the history, the rich history that South Africa has had and continues to have and supports globally from a skills perspective. There's also the recognition that coordination is important, as is policy certainty. And what do we do as a country to ensure that as we evolve in the mining industry, we can then support that evolution with policies, but also action items and ways that would support the mining industry as it evolves. Building on this, just a few remarks that I would like to make, and I'll ground those remarks in mineral beneficiation specifically. How do you create value from minerals in the African continent? And I'll use the place-based investment proposition of the OR Tambo SEZ in particular, which is located in Gauteng. I want to start off by a provocative remark. Belgium has historically controlled the world's diamond prices. They've never mined a single diamond in Antwerp. London controls pretty much the gold price. They've never had a gold mine. From these two examples, one thing that is clear, what's critical for mining to have value is not the extraction. And the mining value and extraction are not always intertwined. To have the value, you need a couple of things, and those are the things that we at the OR Tambo SEZ and Gauteng in general are driving to reinforce. The first one is skills. Again, the discussion of skills, very imperative. At the OR Tambo SEZ and using what we are doing to develop a jewelry manufacturing park, our focus in the first instance in developing that SEZ was to really understand where the skills are at, what the challenges are, and how do we as government then work in reinforcing and developing those skills. We have found that over the years, and it is true that there has been a skills drain, and that over the years, if you look back to the 1990s, there were probably between 5,000 and 6,000 diamond cutters and polishers in South Africa. Fast forward to 2024, you're lucky if you find anything between 300 and 600. It tells you that the skills have gone away, and that if we're going to create value from the extraction, whether it is diamonds or whatever, or that we mine, skills become critical. And so we are working on that, and it's one of the things that we do in Gauteng, and one of the things that we believe that in Africa in general, you need an answer for the skills. The second one is infrastructure, and again, that was spoken to. Infrastructure becomes very critical. If you look at London, for example, the bullion markets, the financial systems, the infrastructure that was embedded in creating a financial district, if you will, that was centered around minerals, and yet they never mined minerals or the gold in that way, will tell you that the infrastructure is critical. The same with Antwerp. They never mined a diamond, but they've created a cluster of diamond traders and really just a diamond industry that is vibrant. So the infrastructure is key, and infrastructure becomes a critical role for government, because some of the infrastructure costs are sunk costs, and they would need government to step in. What do you do to enhance electricity, and how do we do so competitively, given that we do accept that electricity is a major cost in the value creation landscape, at least upwards of 30%, depending on who you ask, and how do we get it down so that we can compete with the likes of China? Because if you can't answer that problem, you will continue to export your value. The third one that one would speak of is the value chain integration. Very, very critical in creating that value. Again, drawing from the example that we have done on the jewelry manufacturing park, we looked at the entire value chain and say to ourselves, what do we need to do to ensure that it is competitive? So what are the inputs, and where do the inputs lie, and how do you allow those inputs to be close together so that they can collaborate, not to compete, but to collaborate and provide opportunity, therefore, for business to do what business does best, which is produce, but produce at a cost-effective and cost-competitive price. Because ultimately, we are in a global village, and the costing does matter. And so the value chain integration becomes really, really critical, not just for gold, but for any ore that you would mine. The last one is really about efficiencies, and we underplay efficiencies, and I guess that has been some of the problems that we have faced in South Africa, but how do we do it differently? That said, we do acknowledge Gauteng is contributing at least close to 35% of South Africa's GDP. Of that, 1% is linked to mining. Of that, you have at least upwards of 70,000 odd jobs linked to the mining industry, whether direct or indirect, and in this instance, indirect. But how do we create an efficient ecosystem that allows us to grow the economy, that allows us to continue to play an active role? We do say that whilst extraction may have moved away from Gauteng, the value is still there, and I think a lot of the MEC mentioned it, the panelists have said the same. There is still value. The issue is how do we then enhance that value and ensure that value is reinforced and continues to create the jobs that we need, continues to provide a platform for investment. In that regard, the upcoming investment conference that we'll be hosting in April is aimed at exactly that, engaging with business, engaging with different stakeholders, to have a platform from which we can discuss all the different opportunities that Gauteng has to offer at the SEZ zones that we are developing, at the industrial parks, and in the many different areas within which government can support and unlock that money so it can flow, because the capital is still based in Gauteng. The Johannesburg Stock Exchange is really birthed from the mining of the Witwatersrand Basin, and it continues to be active. Whether you're doing a transaction for mining in the Congo or Zambia, you will find more often than not the people that are making the decisions for the capital to flow are sitting in Sandton. In that regard, I would like to thank you so much to the panelists, and thank you so much for your time, and we look forward to seeing you in Gauteng in April. Thank you.
Thank you. And I know that Cape Town is nice, but Sandton's always also nice. We have Sandton, you have the sand here in Cape Town. All right, we are getting to the Q&A session, but of course we're very, very tight on time. So I think we can take 2 questions that will be directed to the panelists. Please be concise with your questions. Don't go into context, just ask the question. And then I'd also like to ask the panelists to be very clear and quick with your questions. So if you could please put your hand up if you have a question for us. There we go. There's one there in the middle.
Okay, hi everyone. Abraham Mokome from Western Area. Western Area is one of the areas with all of the gold that's going into the world. In fact, I've got a comment to our initial speaker, Mr. Maile. Can we continue the conversation in Gauteng, and can we have timeframes? Can we have an action plan as to the response? Because today we are talking about, yes, there are problems. We see the world is continuing. We see China is progressing. What are we doing? Can we have those? Can we get the skills? I'm into skills development. We've got programs, but NQF level is not speaking to industry. Let us also talk about that in Gauteng, Mr. Maile. The panel, I've heard your comments and they're very critical. We also need expert opinion on the subject. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that. And I'm sure you will be able to engage with them even after the session. There we go. The MEC has put his hand up. Can we please have another question? Nothing? There we go. There's one here in front. There's one here. Yeah, in front, the gentleman in front.
Thanks. And a quick one in terms of collaboration partnerships from your vast experiences on the panel. What needs to change? I mean, we've talked about we need to change it. What needs to change from your perspective to get that working so we solve the problem, right? We all said it's the key to resolving this problem. So where's the bottleneck and what do we need to do to change it?
Maybe one sentence from each of you.
If I summarize, we got to sit together as a cluster or association. Individually, we might not have the solution that will de-risk the system. But collectively, if we sit around the table, we all bring information and experience and knowledge. And if we sit around the table, collectively, you will bring a better solution to the forefront. And that better solution allows the finances to come to the table because, in essence, we de-risk it. The finances always are standing back because of risk. And if we sit around the table, the right people around the table will give the solutions that de-risk the solution.
Quick sentence from you, Gary?
Yeah, collaboration in concept sounds easy, but it's very difficult. We've got to find, someone has to take ownership of driving that. There has to be a joint value proposition of doing it because we're all busy in our day jobs. So it needs ownership and drive.
Matimba?
Yeah, from my side, I'll say the clusters like MEMSA get to support them and resource them properly because you've got a team of people who have done it and they've got the resources to make the change here in South Africa and get those people who are well positioned to actually do the work. And lastly is looking at the government to unlock those stumbling blocks, those red tapes, to make sure that, you know, we're not pushing against the the tide. Yeah, we're not going.
Okay. On that note, Dr. Tebogo?
One, there's now the exploration fund at the IDC. Anglo is also putting money into that. Go look for the opportunities in there in terms of exploration. We are working on the mineral beneficiation strategy. There's nothing like that in the country.
Yeah.
And we cannot talk about mineral beneficiation without the strategy. That's one. Lastly, there's an opportunity for us to be the hub for the manufacturing of mining equipment and export that equipment to Africa and BRIC countries, because Africa is a growing area for minerals. Yeah.
All right. I would have loved to squeeze in the last 30 seconds of this, but I think it's safe that we don't. I'm sure you can catch the panelists and some of the speakers here after the session, but thank you so much for joining us. And really important points that were raised there, and I'm hoping that we can take all of this and turn it into workable action plans. Great need to reindustrialize South Africa, as the president of Zambia said at the opening ceremony of the mining indaba, is that we need to position mining in Africa as the center of economic renewal. And of course, mineral beneficiation is the goal in creating value for the Gauteng province and the continent as a whole. Of course, skills. People need to be at the center of it all. And of course, this does not happen without collaboration and partnerships. And policy needs to play its part and be agile to meet the needs of the mining ecosystem and to attract capital. And as my day said, while extraction has moved away from Gauteng, the value is still there. So we need to capitalize on that. Thank you very much for your time and for your ears today, ladies and gentlemen. We really appreciate it. Please do enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.